Shocking impacts of American serious strategic mistakes. Bankruptcy? When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the US and its allies didn't use armed force to stop them. Instead, they put harsh economic sanctions in place, which were meant to damage Russia's economy and bring it to its knees. It looks like no one in Washington thought about the chance that other countries that want to weaken the US power might have something to say about that. Yes, that's what did happen. China, which has the world's biggest economy in terms of purchasing power, gave Washington the middle finger by buying more oil, gas, food, and other goods from Russia. India, which has the third largest economy in the world right now, and more than 100 other countries did the same thing. Now let's talk about Iran. Most Americans know amazingly little about this country. Iran is the 17th biggest country in the world. It's bigger than Texas and has even more oil and natural gas than Texas. The country is also a growing industry power. Its car business is doing very well, and it also makes and sends its own rockets into space. Since the US put harsh sanctions on Iran soon after the Shah's fall in 1978, it's safe to say that the government and business world there know all the possible ways to get around those restrictions. As soon as the war in Ukraine started, Russia and Iran began making trade deals that were very good for Iran. It was clear that one of the terms of the deal was that the Iranians taught Russian officials how to avoid sanctions, which they had learned the hard way. With a little help from China, India, and most of the rest of the world, the sanctions quickly failed completely. Today, the sanctions hurt the US and Europe more than they hurt Russia. However, the US government has put itself in a situation where it can't back down. This could help explain a lot about why Russia's operation in Ukraine has been so slow. There's no need for the Russians to hurry. They are aware that time is not on their side. Since the 1970s, US sanctions have been the big stick that Washington used to frighten countries that weren't following the rules. These countries weren't small enough for an attack or weak enough for a CIA-backed operation to change the government. In the past year, we learned that the US big stick was actually made of balsa wood and broke in Joe Biden's hand. Because of this, countries around the world that used to think they had to trade in dollars are now moving to their own currencies, or the currencies of countries that are becoming more powerful. This means that the US dollar will soon no longer be the world's main currency. It's been interesting to see how economists have responded to this. As you might expect, a lot of them just say it's not happening because economic data from past years doesn't show it yet. Others have said that there isn't a ready-made currency that can replace the dollar. This is true, but it doesn't matter. That role was taken away from the British pound at the start of the Great Depression, and no other currency was ready to fill it. After a slow start, the US dollar became the main currency used for international trade around 1970. It was a rough time for international trade, and trading partners used whatever currencies or product deals they could agree on. This is exactly what's happening now in the free-for-all of global trade that will define the post-dollar age. Changes in the way wealth is distributed around the world are having an interesting effect. One effect is a return to the mean. Until the time of the European Kingdom, East and South Asia were the world's economic hubs of all the countries in the world. India and China were the richest. Other wealthy countries, as Iran, Japan, made up the rest of the picture. Some people still live in the same part of the world as other people. During the great age of European conquest, a lot of that wealth was briefly sent to Europe, making Asia poorer in the process. Around that time, the European colonial powers started to fall apart in the years after the Second World War. However, the US kept up some of the same arrangements after the war. Those are now falling apart, and Asia is rising. By the end of next year, 2025, 4 of the 5 world's biggest countries by buying power parity will be in Asia. The US is 5th, but it might not stay there for long. The most clear worries are the growth of management jobs in the US government, businesses and nonprofits. In an age of empire, that's a smart move because it puts money into the market economy, which gives the poor the few jobs that are available. It's common for both public and private offices to be full of office workers whose work doesn't add to the economy, but does keep the consumer sector going. There's already less air in that bubble. It's a sign that Elon Musk fired about 80% of Twitter's staff after taking over the company. Other big internet companies are doing the same thing, though not yet to the same degree. Everything that's been said lately about AI, artificial intelligence, is making the same trend stronger. Large language models, LLMs, are the programs that make robots work. They are very good at imitating the more common ways that people use language. A lot of people who work in offices these days spend most of their time writing texts like this, like court papers, contracts, press releases, news stories, and so on. Those jobs are being taken away. Code writing is even easier to do with an LLM, so you can also say goodbye to a lot of software jobs. This problem affects all types of business that depend on putting together reliable strings of symbols. According to a new study from Goldman Sachs, LLMs will either completely or partially take over about 300 million jobs in the industrial world. In the next few years, CGI picture production is another tool that can do the same thing. Not too long ago, Levi's said that all of its future catalogs and ads will use CGI pictures instead of models, and shooters who get paid a lot. The same thing will likely spread to many places. Also, Hollywood is up next. Soon, a computer program will be able to take all the footage of Marilyn Monroe from her movies and use it to make new Marilyn Monroe movies for a very small part of the cost of hiring real actors, camera teams, and other costs. Because of this, there will be a huge drop in high-paying jobs across a large part of the business. What's going to happen now? Well, some experts will scream at the top of their lungs that nothing important will change, and others will start screaming that the end of the world is here. These days, those are the only two choices that our minds can think of. It's clear that neither of those things will happen. Instead, the working classes in the US and many other countries will slowly fall apart, just like the middle and upper middle classes did in the late 20th century. At random times, layoffs, company bankruptcy, falling wages and benefits, and the newest high-tech, no help wanted signs will happen right after each other. Over time, all the businesses that make money by catering to these groups will also stop making money. Communities will fall apart, just like the mill towns in the English Midlands and the American Rust Belt did 50 years ago. But this time, it will be the turn of fancy areas and urban neighborhoods to fall apart as the income streams that kept them going go away. The process will take a while. There are fewer and fewer countries that use the US dollar as their main currency for trade, but some countries will still use it for years to come. It will take a little less time, but it will still take some time to break down the plans that send unfair wealth to the US. It will take decades for the worker class to fall apart and the neighborhoods to be torn apart. That's how these kinds of changes work. The American economy and the larger project of industrial civilization were falling apart around us. People who wanted to be ready for it needed to start getting ready soon by cutting their spending, paying off their debt, and learning the skills they would need to make goods and services for people instead of the corporate machine. In short, the United States will lose all of its money. At the federal level and below, our big businesses, our governments, and a lot of our wealthy people have racked up huge bills that can only be paid off with direct or indirect access to the stolen wealth the US stole from other countries. Most of those bills can't even be paid for much longer, let alone paid off. They can either stop paying on them or let the prices go up so high that they no longer exist. Either way, plans based on normal levels of spending will not be doable. The problems caused by ending these plans are very big because they include most of what Americans consider to be a normal way of life today. What this means is that the 5% of us in this country will have to live like we did before 1945. That would have been a hard change, but not a disaster if we still had the workplaces, the trained workers, the plenty of natural resources, and the thrifty ways of living from back then. Of course, it's hard because we don't have those things anymore. During the outsourcing boom of the 1970s and 1980s, when the British economy went into speed, the plants were shut down. The trained workers were then left to be neglected by bad people. Country got to this point. The road to our nation's bankruptcy. Different sources give different numbers, but the US is thought to owe at least $31 trillion, which is a huge amount of money. That's one reason the US government keeps asking debtors for more time to pay us back. When you do this, you add to your debt by charging more interest. In order to pay off our debt, the US Treasury makes more money and bonds. This means that the machines that print money are always busy. The value of our dollar and government bills goes down because of this. If the US Treasury went bankrupt, 5 very bad things would happen to our country. 1. The savings that Americans have would be worth almost nothing. In the 1960s, $100 today would be worth less than $20. In 2 more years, $100 will be worth less than $10 in the 1960s. Our life savings aren't worth as much as we thought they were, and they won't last as long as we had planned. 2. Taxes will go up by a huge amount. When the U.S. Treasury can't meet its obligations, it will raise taxes on people to get the money it needs to settle its bills. We will have less money to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table if our taxes go up by 50%. 3. People's lives will be in danger. To avoid acting too dramatic, people who are desperate do dangerous things. When people don't have any money, they will steal because they are so mad. There will be more violence. There won't be enough police to stop looting and bloodshed because the government will be broken. 4. People will no longer get any benefits from the government. In simple terms, the government won't be able to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps. This makes me wonder how people will stay alive. There isn't a good answer to that question, though. 5. Living standards that are lower. There will be more jobless because businesses will close. Folks who are out of work and have almost no funds will not be able to buy even the most basic things they need to live. That brings us back to the fact that the government will not have any money to help its people. How do you see something happening now around you and feel? The video for today has come to an end. We are grateful that you took the time to view this video. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the most groundbreaking content. If you enjoyed watching this video, showing it to your friends, commenting, and giving it a like, bye and have a nice day.